Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Getting to Really Know. Today we're really excited to have with us our dear brother Omar Din. MashaAllah, man. It's really great to have you, and great episode, by the way. Getting to know, right? It was awesome.
I thought it was. I thought that guy did really well. A little biased.
Hey, can I say something?
Really well.
And I mean this in a good way.
Yeah.
You're funny, dude.
I know. Thank you.
You're pretty funny.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I fake it well.
Yeah. No,
We were cracking up in the back, man. It was
No,
so funny.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much for having me today, because I think, like any man, when I've watched, like, honestly, celebrity interviews online, I'm just thinking to myself, I could do that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And now I get to, like, actually get tested. Let's see if that's true or not.
You are, man. You are. You're a natural, so
I do it for the validation.
Yeah.
it's good to have you. Rami, it was awesome, man.
Oh, we have our amazing guest host, Rami Sultan. Can we get a round of applause, audience, for Rami Sultan?
Yeah.
So, inshallah, he's going to spearhead this, and we're here to have a good time and get to really know you, Omar Din. All right, Rami, take it away.
Awesome. Let's jump in. So, Omar, you've been part of the community since you were born. And something that's really neat about you that maybe not everybody knows, but you really got into politics at a very young age. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Or we want to find out, that's a little bit unique with young people. That's not something that they think about at that young of an age in terms of getting into public office. What drove you? What motivated you to do that? And tell us about maybe more about that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, that's you guys are very nice in the way that you're describing me. I'm definitely gonna bring my parents next time I do this so that they can hear all of that. I think it's fascinating the way you put it, because on one hand, I agree with you where I think most people aren't going the route that I've gone, but at the same time, actually within our community, mashallah, I think most people, in a sense, actually are very political in the same way that I was, because I only became involved in politics without realizing that I was being involved in politics, which has been the case for, I think, everyone in my generation. Because I was around 3 when 9/11 happened. And we're so familiar. At this point, it's kind of like tiring almost to talk about the impacts of 9/11 on the Muslim community, but we still feel it today. But one of the benefits of it is it brought our community together, right? It really galvanized this sense of civic engagement in everyone. So when I grew up going to, the masjid, going to community events, my understanding of community was just political organizing. And I didn't know that that's what it was. I just thought, when you're part of the community, that's just what you do. You go to protests, like you talk about what's happening in Palestine. You talk about everything that's happening to our community. And so for most people in the community, that's been the case, actually. I think there's not one Muslim you meet who's gone through college and on campus isn't involved with some kind of organizing, isn't involved with some kind of activism. That's in our blood. I think where things get unique is electoral politics. Because sometimes people say, the Muslim community doesn't do politics. And I'm like, that's not true. Like, the Muslim community is the most political community out of any community I know. Like, we are so belief driven, right? Where justice is so central to who we are. Where we, I think, now are getting involved in a way that we hadn't before is in electoral politics. Electoral politics is actual voting. It's actual elections focused work. That's a little bit newer to all of us. And I think when I was in high school is when I got involved in that. And that's part of more of what you're getting at in terms of like, people don't normally do that. And it's because I used to, as just through the community, I would intern at CARE. I would do work there. I would go to protests all the time. And I was like, wow, this is, it's incredible. It makes you feel like you're part of something larger. And while I was doing that, I thought about, well, how do I actually build my life around something like this, right? This makes me feel meaningful. This is what I think is meant to be our purpose. But how do you actually make change and do those things? And I realized, like an elected official, CARE on their best day, and I love CARE and they do great work, but on their best day, they're helping people one case at a time or a couple dozen cases at a time. But a legislator, an elected official, when they pass a law with the stroke of their pen, they can impact 10,000 people at once, 1 million people, or in the case of California, tens of millions of people with one move. That is how you create change. And so when I was in high school, I decided, I want to run for office the moment that I can, because that is how I think I can actually create the world that I want to see.
And how old were you when you first ran for public office?
I was 22 when I ran for council. And alhamdulillah, I got elected, mainly because we have a community that was willing to support.
Awesome. And what was the position?
I ran for city council. So I got elected to city council when I was 22. I ran in a three-way race. So I had two other opponents. I ended up coming in first in the vote. And because I was 22 when I ran, I was the youngest person, but also the first Muslim and the first South Asian ever elected to the city council in Sunnyvale.
It's amazing, man.
Alhamdulillah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, I don't know what I was doing. I was 22, man. I still wasn't making my bed then. That's great, man.
So forgive my ignorance, and I want to make sure all our viewers kind of understand what you're running for now. You're running for state assembly. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So what does that mean, just for the average, layman?
Yeah, and I think most people, unless you were like me in high school, and I think the scientific term is a dork, basically, you're not going to be as familiar with it. So I think you're just like most people. And that, a lot of people know what Congress is.
Right.
Congress kind of oversees the entire country. It creates the laws for the whole country. The state legislature or the state assembly is like Congress, but for the state of California. Now, California is powerful. I think we forget here. California, if it was its own economy, would be like the 10th largest economy in the world, right? So you're talking about something that's akin to its own country, and not just a country, one of the most powerful countries, if it was. And the state legislature is the group of people who run the entire state, who make laws, who everything from your driver's license to the roads you drive on to the homes that you live in, all of those are overseen by the state government. And so the state assembly, if I'm elected to it, is the body that writes all of those laws, that passes policies that impact tens of millions of people. And there has never been a Pakistani American in the California state legislature in its entire history, over centuries of existence. So it's really exciting that we're running, and I think we have a very good shot at winning and breaking that barrier.
Amazing. And how many state assemblies are there in Sacramento?
There are 80 members of the state
There
assembly.
are 80. Okay.
Yeah.
So from different counties around California.
Yeah,
basically.
and what's wild is the district I'm running in has 500,000 people that live in it. Out of all the states in the country, California has the biggest ratio of legislators to the number of people they represent. In other states, each legislator represents a lot smaller of a number of people. California, we have such a massive population that each person represents a district almost the same size as a congressional district.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's why it's so difficult to win these races in California, because this is the big leagues. Like, it's not these little council races anymore. And I think for the first time, our community, alhamdulillah, is in a place where we can finally win this for ourselves. We don't need to go and convince some politician or elected official from outside our community that we exist and that we matter. We have enough power that we can just go and do it ourselves. And that's what I think has been the most empowering thing in this whole process, is seeing that inspiration play out on everyday community members. That's really keeps me going.
And
So you're moving to Sacramento, basically.
Now you still live in the district, but you do spend half the week in Sacramento and half the week, which is the state capital, and half the week back in your district. And where we are in the state, that means that you have to drive it. The SoCal people are lucky because the state pays for them to fly.
No way.
But it makes sense, right? Because if you're like, how else would you 6 hours one way? But if you're here, you have to do the 2-hour drive twice a week to go there and back.
So what's really interesting is that the district that you're running in has a huge Muslim community.
Yeah.
Has a number of masajid, MCA, which is the largest masjid, Muslim Community Association in NorCal. How does that feel, and how has the response been from the community about you representing them as well as the larger community?
I mean, it's been incredible. I think it's so crazy how quick this race is. Typically, assembly races are 8-9 months long. The way that this all played out, because the person that used to have the seat decided only a month ago to run for Congress, so the seat opened up. That was only a month ago, and the election is on March 5th. So it's already been a month and a half in the campaign, and there's only a month and a half left. Yet in that time, our community has gotten so involved in this campaign and has really alhamdulillah, and I don't say this in an, oh my God, I'm so great. I think the community realizes this isn't about me, and I don't think it's about me. It's about us. It's about this community, because like I said, for the first time, we get to represent ourselves. And so MCA being inside this district is huge, because it's not just the largest masjid in NorCal. I think it's the largest masjid in California, and one of, if not, I've heard maybe even the largest masjid in the entire country. and that's in this assembly district. So there's a real opportunity here, and people are seeing it, and people are buying into it, and that's keeping me just so grateful and so humbled. Because what you realize when you run for office, and I realized this when I ran the first time, if you're doing it the right way, right, if you're not letting your enuffs get to you, that you don't win because of yourself, right? You just can't. There's no way. You win when you have people behind you. And so you realize that all of this is due to the community. And that's what I've been seeing this time around. In our first 3.5 weeks from when we launched the campaign to when the month of December ended, we raised close to $300,000.
Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Amazing.
And it's all from individual donors. The only PAC that donated to us that month was the Sunnyvale Employees Association, which is a union. And so it just goes to show that our community actually has a big role to play in politics. When I've gone to Sacramento since then and met with people who do politics for a living, who are the big players, I tell them that number. I say we raised that much off of individuals, and their eyes bulge out. People are not used to the Muslim community playing politics, and so they didn't think we could do it well, and we are changing that, and that's been incredible.
So two quick follow-up questions. So what cities make up this district that you're running for, and how many folks are running for the seat?
Oh, those are some great questions. So there are 3 cities entirely within the district: Sunnyvale, Cupertino, and Santa Clara. And then there's a little tiny bit of San Jose that got roped in, but much smaller compared to the actual cities. And out of those 3 cities, Sunnyvale is the largest city. And that's why we have such a good shot, actually. That's a big part of it. Because you asked about my opponents. There are a number of people running, but really there are only 2 real opponents, right? Sometimes a lot of people on races like this will just put their name down. But races are very hard. You have to raise a lot of money. You have to do a lot of work. So I have 2 real opponents. Both of them work for people who are already in the state legislature. So they're trying to run to, take one of their boss's jobs, basically, and do that. I'm the only person running who's actually on a city council within one of the cities. And so I'm the only one who's worked on issues like housing, like transportation, economic development, supporting small businesses, right? These are policies I actually have a track record I can point to. And because Sunnyvale is the largest city in the district, I have the biggest number of voters who already know who I am, who voted for me in the past. And that's a really big deal, because when the race is this short, voters don't have time to get to know the candidates, right? Our primary is in a month and a half. And so because we all could only jump in a month and a half ago, nobody has time to really create a name for themselves if they don't already have one. And that's why I decided to run, because I knew it was a big risk, right? Like, when you run for seats like this, we see what they do to Muslims. We see what they do to Rashida, to Lehan, the way they attack them. And I think that's going to happen to me too. But because we have the strategic advantage, and because the time is so short, we have a real chance to get in there and win before there's even time for them to realize, the way that our community has come together. And when I say they, I mean the people who are opposed to our community. And on top of that, the demographics of the district are really good for us, because they favor South Asians more than they would favor another race. And so that means a candidate like me has a really good shot. And when the race is this short, voters, they don't have, right? They're not going to really know what each of us stand for. They're going to look at the ballot and say, oh, I kind of remember that name. All right. Or they say, oh yeah, that's a similar race to my own. That's how voters tend to think. And so demographics play a huge role. It isn't. It isn't. I mean, look, I'll be honest. If I saw the name Muhammad on a ballot, I'd be like, that's.
You see, you relate to, you understand. That's
And you know that representation matters.
Right.
Like, some of the people who have been in elected office that represent our community here at home have been saying some really bad things about our community. Let's be honest, right? And so representation shouldn't be the reason alone that you vote for someone. I think we should vote for candidates not because they're Muslim, but because they're the best candidate. And guess what? Being Muslim to me makes you a much better candidate. But also, you realize that having good Muslims elected helps the whole ummah, helps the community. And that's been a big thing that I've seen happen time and time again.
I have an ignorant question. So now that you've leaving your seat, do you lose it if you don't win then?
So kind of. Basically, the way these races work is when you're already elected, like I am, you can run for anything else that you want. But if you have a re-election coming up for yourself, you have to choose. Because all these races happen at the same time, right? They're all on the ballot in the primary, and then there's the actual election in November, right? And presidential, Senate, Congress, everyone. city council mayor. So yeah, I'm actually up for re-election this coming year on my council seat. But I saw a good enough chance to win this seat to break those barriers for not just myself, but for our community, that I was like, okay, if I had to choose between one or the other, I think this is where I can do the most good, right? Because this type of position allows me to work on issues that go much deeper and much more important to our community than just the ones on the city level. The city one's important. But these ones go further. And so for that reason, I thought, you know what? It's worth taking the risk of not being able to be a council member anymore if it means that I get to do this for everyone else.
And you've done your part, so I mean,
Alhamdulillah.
jazakumullah khair.
So you joined City Council, Sunnyvale City Council at 22.
Yeah.
And now
Well, I was
you
sworn in at 23.
sworn in at 23. Well, no problem. We'll round up. And now you're how old?
26.
26.
Yeah.
And
Mashallah.
now you're the vice mayor
Yes.
of Sunnyvale.
Yes.
And so talk to us a little bit. I want to circle back to what you said, which I thought was really phenomenal. You're someone sort of who's an organic politician or a public service member where you grew up in the community.
Yeah.
You ran for elected office within the community. And then you mentioned that your two major opponents are supporting representatives, but they're not serving public office currently.
Well,
as
they are
representatives.
serving. They are in public office. They're just not on city council.
Yeah, they're not
They're both
representatives.
on educational boards.
Educational boards, got it. And so talk to us about how that experience translates on Sunnyvale City Council to what you can bring to State Assembly.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. And on top of actually the opportunity I've had on the city council, a year ago, a little bit over a year ago now, I was actually appointed to the board of directors for the VTA, the Valley Transportation Authority, which is the body that oversees all of the buses and the light rail and a lot of the transit in Santa Clara County. Actually, one of the big projects we're working on is the BART extension. People don't realize VTA is the one overseeing all of it, not BART. And when BART extends into Santa Clara County, it's actually VTA that takes over and runs the stations and everything, even though it has a BART logo. So I've, alhamdulillah, and it really is from Allah, that even though I am so young, that I've had the opportunity to work on such incredible and impactful things. And I've learned so much. I really like politics are hard, but policy making is hard too, in a very different way. Right? Politics is that art of connecting with others, convincing them of what's right. Policy making it's entirely different. That's like, you really have to know what you're doing. Because if you don't, then people who do know what they're doing are going to come and take advantage of you. They're going to trick you into thinking you're doing the right thing when really you're just serving their interests. And that's something I've seen happen time and time again on elected office. That's why I believe it's so important that people who run for higher office need to start out lower down so that they can get that in-depth understanding, so that they can get that skill set. Because otherwise, when you get to higher office, you can have all the right values. But if you don't know how to turn those values into actual outcomes, then it's useless. And so my time on council and on VTA board and as vice mayor have been the best lessons anyone could ever get on how to do this. And I actually have a lot of respect for my opponents. I think they're doing things for the right reasons. I think they're in it for the right reasons. But where I see myself as set apart is as a council member, and as the only council member running, I've actually worked on housing, right? I got 20,000 units of housing approved in my district. And for context, Sunnyvale right now only has around 60,000 units of housing. So when you increase 60,000 units by 20,000 more units, guess what happens to your cost? Because supply and demand, it goes down. It goes down significantly over time. And of those 20,000 units that I got approved, 15% of them are set aside for affordable units, 5% for very low income people. And so that's the ways that we can take the policy vehicles we have and utilize them to drive impacts for our community. And those are all lessons that I've had at the ground level that now I get to take with me to the state assembly, because all of the things the state works on, it doesn't work on in a vacuum, right? Like if we need to fix housing in the state, which we do, we need to pass policies that allow cities to better create housing, because housing development happens at both the state and the city level, right? The two governments work together because every city has a say on what does and doesn't get built within their borders. And then the state comes in and says, well, we need this kind of housing. We need more affordable housing. We need this, we need that. But it's really complex how all of that happens, the laws involved. And I've been very immersed in it while I've been on the city level, which has allowed me to understand, if I get to the state level, how to do it right? How we can actually drive those outcomes. And that's something I care very deeply about.
And just to follow up with housing, it's like a waterfall effect where, people complain about homelessness, for example,
Yeah.
but then there's the rising cost of housing and
Yeah.
living and wages not keeping up with that. And then people don't think about, the importance of having affordable housing, more
Yeah.
housing, in order to bring down those costs, to give people more opportunities
Totally.
to actually live or rent in a home.
Totally. And I mean, when you look at it, because people, they talk about the homeless issue quite a bit, right? And our unhoused community has only been growing over the last few years. And when you look at any empirical study, right, like alhamdulillah, I had the opportunity to get that degree in public policy at Cornell, at an Ivy League, and you learn while you're there how to actually read these really academic papers. Well, it's something that every academic paper shows. There is a direct correlation between your cost of housing and the number of homeless people. It's basic logic, right? If it's more expensive to get a house, less people can get a house, right? If you can't afford a home, then you end up on the street. And so as our cost of housing has kept rising and rising and rising, we've seen at the same rate an increase in the number of people on the street. And the issue with that is in the way that we think about these things at the state level, we only treat the symptoms. We don't actually get to the root cause. Homelessness, by and large, is a symptom of a larger issue, right? Around both our housing, but also our social support, right? Where all of the welfare programs that the state and that the country used to have kind of gone away by and large. And so right now, if you're someone who's struggling, if you were born with mental health issues, right, really extreme ones, you're going to end up falling into the cracks. And once you're there, there's no safety net anymore. There's nothing to get out of it. If we took every person on the street off the street today, right, we gave them a home, in 10 years, you're still going to have just the same number of people, if not more, on the street. Because they're not on the street because they want to be. I think that's something that we really need to get into people's minds. A lot of people think, well, they're just lazy. Which, I mean, just again, read any study, go meet with anyone that does work with the homeless people, right? I actually, in Sunnyvale, go around quite regularly and visit the different encampments in the city, because I don't think we need to just sweep them away. I think we need to go and meet with these people and understand, what has gone wrong in our society that this is happening. Because, and this is something I do believe really deeply, I'm going to have to answer one day, and all of us that are sitting here are going to have to answer how we were able to go to sleep at night with stomachs that are full while our neighbors was empty, right? That's what the hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, that he who does that is not a believer. And so what Islam teaches us is we have collective responsibilities. Yeah. I think that's where we really differ with a lot of our counterparts, by and large, in the West, is we believe fundamentally that people who end up on the street are our responsibility too. That's a failure on our part. And a big part of that is exactly like I said, that we're not treating the core issues. And the way that we get there is by increasing our social support. That's why in Sunnyvale, one of the things that I'm proudest of that I've done while I've been on the city council is I have created a program called Universal Basic Income. And it's a pilot program where we are taking 100 low-income families and we are going to give them checks of $1,000 a month, no strings attached. Because these are the people who we think are at risk of falling into those cracks. And we're going to say, you know what? Let's give you this. It's a pilot program. We're going to study it to see how it works. But a lot of studies have actually shown that when you give people direct cash infusions, they actually use it for the right reasons. People don't take the money and spend it on a vacation or some luxury goods, because guess what? They don't want to end up on the street, right? And so if they have a car payment that's preventing them from getting out of a cycle of poverty, right? If they have healthcare bills that are piling up, that's what they'll use the money for. And so programs like that are how we get at the homelessness issue. And then on top of that, we need to solve our housing crisis, because if we're not building more housing, we're not building more affordable housing, then more and more people are ending up on the street. And that's a failure that we're going to have to answer for on the day of judgment.
That's amazing. I'm just learning so much right now. I'm like, oof. So I have another question that's just, I have these basic questions. I'm trying to learn about the system and how it works. So like, as a council member, what do you do? Like, tell me a day of, and is it like a full, I mean, I know it's like a very stupid question, but is it a full-time job?
No, I get asked it a lot.
Yeah. And then like, and what's a lazy council member? Like, a day of, like, you know what I mean? I'm sure there is some people like that. And what's a person that really cares and they're doing their job?
Yeah. No, it's a question that people ask a lot, especially when I'm at dinner parties with any family members around. So it's a part-time job, especially, which is actually kind of crazy because Sunnyvale it's a big city. It's 170,000 people, right? Like if you're talking on the East Coast, that's huge in comparison. It's just the nature of California, because we're so populous, is people think of it as a lot smaller. But we have a part-time council, so a lot of people who are on it are usually either retired or independently wealthy. And honestly, that's one of the issues that we have in our governance, is that by design, people are kept out. Because if you're a young person like me, you really have to make decisions about the kind of lifestyle you want. I mean, we work really hard, but they pay, you're not making the big bucks in politics. And so what I've had to do, and a lot of other young elected officials have to do, is you have to take on a day job. So I've actually spent during my early time in office, I was actually working on campaigns. So I was actually a campaign manager for someone else's state assembly race, which is where I learned a lot of the things that I'm now doing for myself. And I think that's why we've been as successful as we've been, alhamdulillah, is because I know what I'm doing as a result. But then for the last year or so, before I resigned to focus on this race, I actually worked for the city of San Jose doing economic development and transportation policy for them. So I was, helping in Sunnyvale and then in San Jose as well, because San Jose is a much larger city. They actually hire a lot more staff. And through doing that, I learned policy work way more in depth, because like I said, it's very hard. The ramp up is very steep when you become an elected official, because from day one you need to start making decisions. You need to start making the right decisions, and we get these for every meeting. We get these big binders of policy papers that's hundreds of pages long. I mean, sometimes thousands, to be honest. And we have like only a week to prep for each meeting, and so each of these decisions we make, there is a lot of work that goes into each decision. So you're talking about what does the look like. I mean, you're doing a lot of reading, right? You have to, right? If I'm deciding about some kind of policy that impacts renters, that impacts the protections they have, if they're going to end up on the street or not, it's really important I make the right choice there, right? Because what am I going to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment? Oh, I'm sorry I pushed people onto the street. I didn't know what I was doing. I signed up for this. And so you spend a lot of time researching. You also meet with a lot of people. There are a lot of people that are impacted by every decision you make, and they have a right to talk to you as a person that's making that decision. So you need to make yourself available. You need to always be.
Do they
good.
come to you? Those people
Yeah,
come to you?
they reach out. I mean, all of our information is publicly available. Our email address is online. Don't email me too much, please. And I'd say on an average day, I'm getting over 100 emails, if not more. And I'm not as good as I should be at responding to them, but it's a big part of it. And then there are a lot of organizations and groups that do advocacy that are very ingrained into the framework. So you meet with them pretty regularly, right? And you're getting a lot of coffee chats. You're doing a lot of Zoom calls. And then also there's a political side, right? Because we're all political in the end. So you're going to a lot of events, you're meeting and greeting a lot of different people. There isn't as much kissing babies, but Allahu alam. We'll see if maybe now that COVID's over, but yeah, you're doing things like that.
And I follow up. Sorry, I'm just curious. So you meet so many people. Like then, like how is that? Like
I'm so good at pretending like I remember you. I meet someone, like I've got it down to an art.
I feel that every single time we meet.
Yeah. No, I remember that time that we did that thing one time. Yeah. I totally do. I'm just kidding. No, because there's so many people. They're like, "Oh, it's so good to see you again," and I'm like, "It's so good to see you again as well. How's your family?" Like, you meet a lot of people, and I'm so bad at names. My favorite thing. This is the best technique that you guys should try if you do this. Is if I meet someone I can't remember the name, I just grab someone else who I do remember. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, and have you met Rami?" And then they're like, "Oh, hi, Rami," and then they say their name, and I'm like,
that's genius.
Yeah.
Masterclass right
The
there.
other one is be like, "Oh, hey, how do you spell your name again? I want to get it right in my phone." And then that's another backfires, because they're like Bob, B-O-B, and I'm like, no, your last name.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. I love that.
Like serious politician.
Oh my God. Question. You mentioned that you're making like decisions on policies and stuff that affect thousands or even millions of people on the state level. Knowing that, I can imagine that you can't make everyone happy.
Yeah.
So like, and you're getting dozens, hundreds of emails and people reaching out, you're meeting people and you can't make everyone happy. Kind of where's the balance, or how do you balance out knowing like, look, this decision I'm making is going to help thousands, but it may upset, I don't know, a dozen or whatever the math might be. What's
Yeah.
kind of how do you float around
That's
that?
I mean, that's the core of it all. That's the hard part of doing this job, is at some point everyone's going to be angry about you or angry at you about something. And so and it's funny because as a tangent to that, I forgot how much this is the case on campaigns. There is nothing that humbles you as much as a campaign, because you will never receive as much criticism in your life as the moment that you run for office. Because even the people that love you will criticize you even more because they care about you. They're like, we don't want to see you lose. You are doing this terribly. You were doing this bad. Like, do this better. And usually they're contradictory too. So one thing you become really good at is also just like knowing what you should and shouldn't listen to, because one person, every time you do something, one person's going to come up and say, you know, because you did that, you're going to lose. And then someone else will say, because you didn't do that enough, you're going to lose. And so then it's like,
noise at that
yeah,
point.
what do you, and so it's, you know, you got to figure out who the right people to listen to are. I think that's a big part of it, both on the politics and the policy side. But also, you know, ultimately you're weighing a couple things. One is, and the most important, what is the right decision in terms of outcome? Right? Like, if we're talking about something, again, that could lead to people being pushed onto the street, that's an easy choice, right? It's like what you have to answer for what you do and for your actions. So I take that really seriously. And then the second is, you're still a representative at the end of the day, right? We live in a democracy, and it's a good thing. Even at the times when the people themselves aren't acting in the best interest of everyone, you still, as an elected official, like, I think, and honestly, I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold me to account for this, how much was I representing their interests? Because that is what I signed up to do, right? And that's a big part of it. And alhamdulillah, we live in a place which, you know, progressive, and people here have good values.
So are you saying sometimes you'll put aside your personal preferences on the matter because the people you represent feel strongly about a certain...
In a way, I think it's more of a, like, sometimes you need to figure out how to get the people bought into the right outcome.
Gotcha.
Because sometimes people aren't going to realize. I don't think any voters are dumb. Right. I think sometimes people think that. I don't think they're dumb. But I do think a lot of people are uninformed. Right. Nobody's going to understand what a tax rate for the marginal increase on this or that is going to, right? Like, but when you inform people and you tell them and you speak to them logically, people get it. That's what I found. People really get it. The trick is doing that at scale. And then I think ultimately you also have a duty at the end of the day to impact the larger change that you believe in. So when I got into politics, especially when I was in high school, a big part of what drove me in was seeing the way that the Muslim community was being treated by the federal government. Because, right, there are so many issues. A lot of the times we don't feel protected, we feel policed.
Yeah.
Right. And so a big thing that I believe in is I need to get to a place one day where I'm changing those things. And as a result, you do need to be strategic. I think if you're not willing to be strategic, right, if you're not willing to get to the table and do what's necessary to win these things for our community, then just get out of the way. Because, right, you're just gonna block. You have to realize the realities of what everything entails, and what that looks like, and what that means is you have to understand who is going to get mad at you for what, right? And I think what other politicians do, and I've seen this a lot, and this is what I always tell people in our community, is the way politicians, especially from outside our community, think is very simple, right? There's nobody who feels fear more than a politician, and nobody who's driven by fear more, because all that most of those other politicians care about is just getting reelected, right? And all that you need to do when you're thinking in that framework is, for every decision, because you know someone's going to be angry at you, you're just thinking, okay, who's out of the two groups that are going to be angry? Because, right, you can only make a yes or a no vote. So when you do yes, they'll be angry at you. When you do no, they'll be angry at you. Out of those two groups, which one hurts you more politically? Which one causes you more pain? And then you just avoid pissing them off, right? That's how most politicians think. And what that looks like in practice is it means that our community, because we've for the longest time haven't been involved in electoral politics, politicians assume, well, Muslims can't hurt us. Muslims, they don't show up. Muslims, they're not organized. That's what they think.
Yeah.
It's the least risky option to upset them.
It's the least painful option, right? To step on the Muslims, if you have to step on someone. And I think what these last few months have shown, and this is what's really powerful, is that's no longer the case. Because even in the case of my council, where the night before I put out a call to our community, I said, hey, there's this issue happening. I need people to come. I thought I'd get a couple dozen if I was lucky. We got 150 people to show up in person with 1 day's notice, and 800 people on Zoom.
Wow.
I mean, that shows the power of our community.
Yeah.
That is how you change the calculus that every other politician is thinking about when they're thinking about the Muslim community.
That was a powerful night, by the way. I came back. I really just felt it. I felt great, and I just saw that power, and I was like, wow, man, this is what they mean when you're, we need to act and we need to
Yeah.
move.
I
So
felt, I mean, again, I felt humbled because I was like, wow, like this is such an incredible community that we have. Like it really is like a humbling experience because you realize that it's not about you. Like, right? It's literally look at the way that people move.
by the way,
And
I'm curious about the other. So I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but like, how is it for everybody else? Like, did they feel like, is this? I mean, for us, we see the power in that, but then for others, was it shocking? Is it
yeah.
like,
Oh my God. I honestly, well, for the entire term that I've been on city council, we've been doing Zoom ever since the pandemic, and sometimes we get a lot of people. Sometimes we get hundreds. I don't think I've ever seen us go above 500 on a Zoom call before.
Wow.
And when I was sitting there, well, I knew. So the night before I put out the call, and I said, guys, I need people to come. Like there are all these people coming to attack us. Like we need our side to be there. And I just thought like, okay, it's 11 p.m. Our meeting's at 7 p.m. the next day. We'll get like a dozen or a couple dozen, right? Maybe if we're lucky. And then throughout the day, I realized how far that call had gone. Like people, alhamdulillah, like, right, mashallah, like people really understood the gravity of this moment and what's going on, not just in Sunnyvale, but in general. And they really were like, oh, like they were spreading it. And then it's funny because I was sitting there and I was like, oh my God, like what is like, because I was also very scared. I was like, okay, this is a lot bigger than I realized it would be.
Yeah, I know. I was realizing too.
Hopefully people like stay on message because right when you have that many people, the tensions are high.
Yeah.
If someone says just the wrong thing,
Right.
It can
that's
backfire.
a political
Yeah,
nightmare.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
if somebody
yeah.
came in and said we hate, and then they say like
Yeah,
a name
yeah,
of a community. That's like, and so I was like midway through the day, I was like, oh my God, I have a whole. Before my issue was, I don't know if there'll be anyone to defend me. Now I have a whole other problem. How do I keep everyone together?
Yeah.
Because like if this goes out of hand, I'm worse off than I was before I called everybody. And so when I was sitting there in the council meeting, and I saw 100 people on Zoom, and I saw people calling, I was like, okay, we're gonna have a lot. Oh no, but okay, hopefully everyone stays. And I saw it go to 200. I was like, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. I was like. Yeah, and then when we hit 800, like 10 minutes before the meeting started, I was like, oh my God. Like I literally was like, you couldn't, and so alhamdulillah, like I'm a good enough politician that no one could see it. You're saying you were feeling empowered. I was
Poker
sitting
face.
there.
Poker
I was
face.
feeling like, oh my God. Like what? But alhamdulillah, our community kept, like we did so well. Like, everyone kept
And
it
the
together.
crazy thing is, this thing kicked off all the other city council meetings, right? Like that
Yeah.
was the kickoff. Truly it
Alhamdulillah.
was, yeah.
And
subhanallah.
Allah is the best of planners because 2 weeks later is when this seat opened up on the state assembly.
SubhanAllah.
I honestly think I wouldn't be as successful as I have been now in the race if it weren't for that. And I'm not saying like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. I didn't, right? And when I understood that people were coming to attack me from the other side, I was stressed. I remember thinking, I'm like, man, like this could be the type of thing that starts my end in politics. Right, because if you're not careful, things they snowball.
Right.
And I was like, man, like I know Allah's the best of planners, but I wonder what the plan here is. Like, this is scary. And look what happened out of it, right? Like
they flattered Allah's the best of
it
planners.
really, well, like honestly, and that's been proven to me time and time again on this campaign because it's so short. But I think if that hadn't happened, people wouldn't have understood. Like, oh yeah, that's who this guy is. Because people know me obviously, but like. I'm not famous. I'm not someone, right? Like I can go to MCA. Like not everyone's gonna know. And I think that really did such a great job of showing people like, oh wow, no, he's been with the community from the get-go, right? Like he's not only showing up when it's the banquets. He's not only showing up when it's fun. He's somebody who's there when it's hard too. And I think that's always, and ultimately because you can't run away from who you are, right? Like I could lose my election, but I can't sleep with myself if I was to like, right, like cross the community. And that makes it easy in a way. It makes politics easy because it's hard when you have to decide what to do. It's easy when you already know what you're gonna do.
I think it speaks volumes to our community as well, because like you were saying, and I was reflecting on this, like you're concerned, right? When you have 800 people, you can't control messaging.
Yeah.
You don't know if people are going to get emotional. I know that a lot of that was in response to what was happening in Gaza and feeling powerless, especially at the a federal level where we don't feel represented, where we feel that this genocide is being aided and abetted by the current administration. It's amazing to see that even when the Muslim community feels like they're powerless and they finally do get a voice, they're not transgressing the boundaries
Mm.
that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put for them,
Yeah.
in which we are not permitted in our faith to hate another community.
Yeah.
We are absolutely
That's so
not.
true.
You cannot be Muslim and have any animosity towards anyone else that's
Yeah.
for, whether it's racism or prejudice
Yeah.
or any of these things. And so, sometimes as well, I think, we don't give our community credit
That's
enough.
such a good point. Wow. You said something that I've never even thought about actually, but I'm now synthesizing as I listen to you, which is we need to give ourselves a pat on the back because every win that we've had in the community, every political win that we do, we're doing it the right way, right? Because in politics, you can get a lot done if you're doing it the wrong way, right? If you're screwing over other people, if you're stepping on other communities along the way, that's what a lot of people who we are fighting against have done. And I'm realizing now as you're talking, and I never thought about it this way, that everything we've ever won as a community, we are doing it the right way. Like that's a big deal because that's the harder way to do it. That's why, and I don't think it's that we're powerless. I think it's that we have a longer road to walk because we, right, are doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Right, we're not taking the shortcuts. We're not going through the moral sort of fog.
It's
right?
the more rewarding way to do it.
Yeah.
The more honorable way to do it.
It's like
Exactly.
we have principles, man.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
we're a principled communities, right?
Yeah.
And a community, and like it's like no matter, like our goal is clear, right?
Yeah.
So then when your goal is clear and your principles are clear, it's so easy to make decisions. It's so easy, and it's
Yeah.
like, and it's based on benefit for the community.
Yeah.
It's not just for the Muslim community. It's for the community. Like it's
Yeah.
every person is a human. Every person is honorable, and they matter. Right? It doesn't matter, right? Obviously, we have our own like things that we care about, but then at the end of the day, as a principled human being, like we're all on the same page. So it's like you said, we are doing it the right way because that's the only that's the only way we know how to do it. You know?
Yeah, that's so true.
So obviously there's a lot more to discuss, a lot to unpack. I know you have a busy day ahead of you, and we'd love to have you back at some point closer
Yeah.
to voting time, just to follow up, or
I'd
maybe
love to.
after the fact. So, but I mean,
Fun
with
fact,
that,
I actually really like to talk about myself.
great, then you're at the right place. So
My sisters are watching, like, yeah, he does.
So I do want to ask, for anyone watching this, right? Like what can they do? Where can they go? How can they learn more? How can they connect with you? How
Yeah.
do they vote? When do they just lay it all out? Because
So the first thing is register to vote. Even if you don't live in my district, like please just like register to vote because Muslims don't vote. This is the issue.
so break it down even more. How? Like
That's a
let's
great
just assume
point.
Auntie's
Yeah.
watching. She's like, you know what? Like, what do I even do?
Honestly, just go on Google, type in register to vote in California, and you'll find a link and you can register online. It's very easy. And now state law has changed over the last few years. Every voter gets a ballot in the mail. You don't even need to go vote. It'll come to you and you can literally like at home, you fill it out and then you don't even need a stamp. You just put it in a mailbox and you voted. It's so easy. But people don't pay attention to elections. And then literally off of margins of only 1,000 votes, literally only 1,000 votes, which there are more than 1,000 Muslims in our district alone. But off of those margins can decide who wins and loses. And that's the difference between somebody who loves our community and someone who hates our community. So these things matter. They matter quite a bit. So register to vote. The second is...
Let me sorry.
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off, but let me do
no.
a plug-in for CARE, actually. They
Please.
just launched their voter registration channel. And the idea behind this campaign is that it's targeted towards the Muslim community to ease the process because, yes, you can Google, you're absolutely right, and you can go through these forms, and it's sometimes a little bit confusing for the aunties and the uncles of the community. But if you go to literally voteforjustice.com, you will see a site that's specifically for the Muslim community to walk them through and streamlines the process to register.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
No,
say
that's
that,
awesome.
what is that again? What's the site?
Voteforjustice.com.
Vote for justice.
Just
Okay.
So that's a
launched.
good
Awesome.
resource there.
Okay, cool. And what is the what is the prime? How important is the primary? And
So
when is that?
important. Basically, before everyone knows that there's an election in November. That's when the president elections are. But leading up to it, there's what's called the primary election. And that's kind of an election that happens months before because so many people run for these seats that to narrow it down, you have a primary where only 2 people move forward. So if there are 10 people running for a seat, the top 2 vote getters in the primary are the only ones that keep going.
So this could end in the primary if
In
somebody.
this race, the primary is everything because there's
Oh,
going to be
wow.
one Republican that wins, and then there are a bunch of Democrats running, and only one of us is going to get on with the Republican. And then in this district, the Democrat gets 80% of the vote no matter what they do. So on March 5th, we're gonna know if I like. That's it. The entire thing
Really?
is done.
This is serious.
It's quick, and I think the biggest thing about that though, and this is what we're doing so well, alhamdulillah, like better than anyone
Alhamdulillah.
expected. But what scares me and what worries me is that people might see that we're doing well and think, oh, okay, they got it, and because it's such a short race, things can turn like that. And if people, now that we haven't won the race, right? But now we're ahead, right? My opponents, we're running past them. It's like a little race. The finish line is right there. My fear, and this is what I'm starting to see, is that people say, "Oh, okay, you're ahead of him. All right, you're good. We can go help others now," and then we'll slow down, and then they'll get to the finish line. And again, it's so quick that this primary, it's over. And so the reality is the most important thing that people can do for me, if they like what they're hearing, if you want to help the campaign, is two things. One is we need donations, right? All of these things are funded by the community. There are 500,000 people in this district. It is really difficult to talk to 500,000 people in a month and a half. You need advertising, and advertising here costs a lot of money. That's why it's so hard to win these races. And so if we don't keep our fundraising going, we're in a tough spot. And so donations are the number one way people can help the race.
Where can people donate?
That's a great question. You can donate at Omar, O-M-A-R, for assembly.com, right? www.omar for F-O-R, assembly.com. And you'll see, more information, and you can also learn more information about me, my stances on different issues, right? What the campaign looks like. But there'll also be a lot of donate buttons, and you can use any of them. And the second thing is, if you're in the area, we need volunteers to help go talk to voters. We're actually, right after this, I'm running over to do the launch of my volunteers. We're going to start going door to door to talk to voters where they are at for the first time today. And we're going to be doing that up until election day. And so if you're in the area, if you've been coming out to council meetings like mine and on Palestine, and you want to keep that energy going, right? Because it's not just about getting resolutions passed. It's about who we elect. Because even though Congress is the only one that oversees the funding that's going to what's happening over there, we need everybody to be supporting a ceasefire, because politics is one big ecosystem. And when you have everyone saying that they're against a ceasefire, which boggles my mind, because how can you be against peace? Then you get into the dangerous position that we're in. And so we need people to be putting that energy also into elections. I think it's just as important as protests. And so come out to our campaign events, come knock doors with me and talk to voters.
Where can people sign up to become a volunteer?
On the same website.
Same website.
Yeah.
And you've been involved, even in earlier life in campaigns. Yeah. Would you say that this is the best way for young people, or really anyone that wants to actually pursue a career?
Yeah. If you want to run for office, volunteer on a campaign. You are never going to learn how to run a campaign other than by doing campaign work. And also, it's probably some of the most meaningful work you can do, because it directly changes who is in power. And that's huge. And when people, I think, inshallah, if things keep going the way they're going, I think when people see the community that we have that's turning out now in electoral campaigns in a way they never have, then non-Muslim politicians are suddenly going to start returning our calls. They're suddenly going to start changing that calculus I talked about around who does and doesn't matter to them. And this is how we show that. This race is that litmus test.
You mentioned that huge success within a very short amount of time. You raised $300,000, and you also mentioned that also gives the perception like, oh, we did it, everyone, right?
Yeah.
We reached this goal. But talk to us a little bit, like, how much do these races actually cost? Even if we got a very strong start off the gate, what will it take to get to the finish line?
A normal primary campaign for state assembly costs $1 million.
Oh,
$1
really?
million.
That high? Okay.
Now we're a little lucky because this race is a lot shorter, but the cost of advertising hasn't changed. The number of voters haven't changed. So it goes to show, like, these races are expensive. Now, the wonderful thing about how it all works, though, is you don't need to raise it all on your own from your own pockets. Alhamdulillah, our community, we're strong enough that we can do a lot of that. But there are a lot of very big organizations statewide that get involved in races like this. And actually, yesterday and the day before, I was in Sacramento meeting with a lot of them. I took 10, 15 meetings back to back, meeting with each of these, talking to them. Things like, statewide nurses associations. My dad's a dentist. I'm with the California Dental Association. They have a lot of money to spend, but they only want to support winners. And so the money that we raise is helpful both in that that's the lifeblood of the campaign, but also if we can keep it going, because the 300,000 that raised eyebrows. People are now looking at us in Sacramento and saying, oh, they might be the front runners, right? People are using that word about me, which is, no one would have thought that a month and a half ago. It's such a hard race. But if in 2 weeks, that's all we've raised, right? 2 weeks from now, that's it. There's not more. Then all these orgs are going to say, oh, okay, that was just one time. They're not, the Muslims actually aren't that organized. And so it's about keeping it going. I think we need to raise another 200 by the end of this month. And then the month after, we need to do it again. And so it's just about keeping the momentum. It's about pushing and pushing. And it's really the biggest factor in elections. It's unfortunate that American election system, that's what it is. It's a money game. But our community is a powerful community. Absolutely. And I think we have the ability to fight and win it at their own game. And that's something that's really exciting.
And what's the maximum donation that someone can do?
$5,500. So anybody can donate up to $5,500 to the campaign.
And if they donated before, but they didn't reach that maximum, they can donate it again if they want. Awesome.
I didn't know money was that important in elections. I thought it was the people and all that. Like,
unfortunately, it's the money. I mean, that's why it's a big deal when grassroots campaigns win. That's why it's a big deal when volunteer-led campaigns win, because it's that hard to do.
Because to his point earlier, you need the money to reach the people.
Yeah.
People aren't going to know about you if they can't hear about you. And you can't go individually meet 500,000 people. So you need the money to amplify your voice. And
you can have the best messaging. You can stand for the right values. Everyone can love you and what you say, and you can be as charismatic. But if nobody knows who you are,
it's like me being a filmmaker. You can make the best film, but if nobody knows about it, nobody's going to watch it.
Exactly. And so it matters a lot in these races.
Yeah. Well, you have all our support and everyone watching, and the Muslim community is strong, and beyond the Muslim community, the community in general is strong, and you know believe in you and everything you're doing, and we wish you all the best, and we'd love to talk with you again, inshallah.
I would love to
have you back here.
This has been fun. For the most fun I've had on the campaign, honestly.
That's amazing.
Only other campaign events were like this.
Any last thoughts or words? Anything you want to just shoot out there?
Man, I think our community, we're in a position now where things are going to change permanently. I think what we've done over these last few months, and I say we, not my campaign, but as a community, the way we've come out to protests, the way we've come out to council meetings, the way we're engaged now, there's no going back. Yeah, and I think non-Muslims, people I would have never in a million years expected to say things, are talking to me on the phone. Non-Muslim politicians, I mean elected officials in this area, and they're using words like genocide. They're using words like ethnic cleansing. I never would have thought anyone outside our community would see the truth. And so things are changing, and it's a big moment for all of us.
That's a huge hopeful message.
It is.
It's a huge hopeful message.
And just go register.
Yeah,
go register to vote.
Yeah.
And make sure you vote March 15th, you said?
March 5th.
March 5th.
By March 5th. Ballots are going to be mailed out in 2 weeks to every voter.
Yeah. So
people can start voting in 2 weeks. That goes to show how dire the moment is for us. In 2 weeks, people start voting, and then it doesn't matter if we talk to them or not because they've already voted.
Yeah.
So it's now or never.
I would even say it's not just register to vote is default. Register as many people as you can.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
It's not just
make sure you vote.
You have to go
register, but you don't vote.
And make sure everyone else votes.
That's
right?
true.
Within your circles.
So important. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Omar.
Thank you so much.
Hashem, you want to close us off with a little dua?
Yes.
Just a quick little 30 seconds.
All right. يا الله الذي لا إله إلا أنت اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك التواب الرحيم. We ask Allah to bless Omar in his campaign and to keep him steadfast and to keep him strong to his principles and to help people and make our community even better and stronger. Ameen.
Awesome. Hey, thank you for spending some time in Bamrick Studios. Hope you enjoyed your time here.
I did. I had a good time.